I want to talk about Michael Knowles and his take on atheism. He's fabricating reasons to believe in Christianity and calling atheists idiots, basically. So let's give it a listen. Michael Knowles debunks blasphemous TikTok atheist. Oh, Kirk Cameron, angry atheists. Knowles versus atheist. Debunks Christopher Hitchens viral moments. All right, check it out.
Anyone who doesn't know this doesn't know anything about it.
Is it not written that I come not to bring a peace but a sword? Surely it is.
I'm saying there are specific biblical scriptural injunctions to do evil.
I'll give you all the miracles and you'll still be left exactly where you are now, holding an empty sack.
You know, I was an atheist for 10 years, and
I bet you totally were 100%.
one of the reasons that I was an atheist is the very unfortunate timing that I was a 13-year-old boy when Christopher Hitchens got really, really popular for being an atheist. And I remember at the time, there were all those new atheists, the four horsemen of the atheist apocalypse: Daniel Dennett, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and Christopher Hitchens.
I had no idea that Daniel Dennett is actually really famous independently of his atheism. I was in some psychology classes in college, and I found him quoted in my textbook, like cited. It's crazy. Daniel Dennett is awesome. Dawkins, I don't think Dawkins is, I don't know. He's got his problems. We'll talk about him another time, but you know, all these people had their problems. Christopher Hitchens was in favor of the Iraq War, for example. Sam Harris was in favor of torture, ostensibly, and is kind of right-leaning, although I feel he's backed off from the right a little bit, so that's something. And Dawkins is like an anti-trans nutcase now, I'm sad to say. So, you know, they'll have kind of their issues, but I do appreciate their contribution to the atheist movement while they were a part of it.
And those first three were not all that interesting, at least not to a 13-year-old boy. But Chris Hitchens really was, he was so clever, he seemed so witty, he was so drunken and sweaty and British. He just seemed really, really great at the time.
Totally, yeah, he's very charismatic.
And I can't even imagine how many poor souls he has led away from God and to eternal perdition. Really sad. Now I find I go back and I read a Hitchens essay, or I look at a Hitchens video, and it just doesn't hit the same. And so Hitchens still has some funny bits. He has bits about how women aren't funny, and he's got some great bits on scotch, and tea, and things like that. But his stuff on God, in retrospect, seems like weak sauce. So the producers have picked the creme de la creme of Christopher Hitchens' atheist videos. I have not seen these videos, or at the very least, I haven't seen them in probably 20 years. And we're going to take a look back, decades after this man helped lead me down the dark road. Take it away.
If you meet someone in the street who you yesterday saw executed, you can say either that an extraordinary miracle has occurred or that you are under a very grave misapprehension. And David Hume's logic on this, I think, is quite irrefutable. He says, what is more likely, that the laws of nature have been suspended in your favor and in a way that you approve, or that you've made a mistake? Especially if you didn't see it yourself and you're hearing it from someone who says that they did. After all, Lazarus was raised, never said a word about it. The daughter of Jairus was raised, didn't say a thing about what she'd been through. And the Gospels tell us that at the time of the crucifixion, all the graves in Jerusalem opened and their occupants wandered around the streets to greet. So it seems the resurrection was something of a banality at the time. Not all of those people clearly were divinely conceived. I'll give you all the miracles and you'll still be left exactly where you are now, holding an empty sack.
Christopher Hitchens is saying, well, what's more likely? That you, the individual, were deceived, or that the laws of nature...
No. That's not what he's saying, necessarily. He's saying, what's more likely, that the laws of nature were suspended in Paul's favor or in any of the other major Christian thinkers in the early days that turned it into what it was, or that they were deceived? Like, Paul was told that these things took place, never met Jesus, didn't know who he was, didn't know anything about the guy, came along like later and started writing about it because he believed what others had told him. So most importantly, I would say, what's more likely, that the laws of nature were suspended or that what Paul was being told really did happen? On an individual level, of course, this works too, but I think that's the most important point here. Yeah, and then there's Christopher Hitchens' famous bit. What was it? Is this from Hitchens? I think he said something like, what's more likely, that the entire natural order is suspended or that a Jewish minx should tell a lie or something like that? I think that's what he said.
Individual were deceived or that the laws of nature were suspended. But when we're talking about the resurrection, we're not talking about you individually being...
Right, no, I don't think it was about individuals. I think it was about the people who got Christianity going but didn't actually know Jesus, who were just told these things.
Suspended. But when we're talking about the resurrection, we're not talking about you individually being deceived. We're talking about 500 eyewitnesses to the resurrection.
No, there were not 500 eyewitnesses to the resurrection. This is just completely made up off the top of your head. This drives me nuts. It's like usually with lies, there's some grain of truth to it, right? There isn't a grain of truth with most of the lies that come out of Michael Knowles' mouth. This is just not true at all. There were not 500 people to witness Jesus' resurrection.
Resurrection, being deceived. We're talking about all of the apostles being deceived.
No?
The earliest Gospels were written within 3 or 4 decades of the resurrection.
30 or 40 years? You're telling me 30 or 40 years later, people started writing about it? And again, most of the stuff that came out of Christianity, most of the very influential books of the New Testament were written by Paul, many of them at the very least. And Paul never met Jesus, didn't know him.
Like me right now, writing about Tupac Shakur. And I say, actually, Tupac rose from the dead.
Actually, it wouldn't be like you writing about Tupac. You know why? Because we're in an information age that they didn't have at the time. You can get on Wikipedia and read about Tupac. You can buy a book on the subject. They didn't even have the printing press at the time. If you wanted a book copied, you had to find the one guy in town that knew how to read, write, or even copy, and have him copy the book for you from like wherever it is. Libraries were like a new concept at the time, okay? It's very different. We're in an information age now. Oh yeah, and you know what else? We didn't have motion picture. We didn't even have recordings at the time. You wouldn't have had any idea what Tupac looked like, or sounded like, or spoke like, or anything at all.
Now, writing about Tupac Shakur, and I say, actually, Tupac rose from the dead. Well, if I said that, and if that story was spreading around, people would contradict me if it didn't really happen. When you see the New Testament accounts, it's referring to people who would have still been alive and whose relatives would have still been alive at the time those gospel accounts were circulating.
Yeah, but the gospel accounts are circulating not in one local little area. They're circulating across an entire region, first of all. And second, the claim that Jesus was resurrected didn't really stop there. It was, he was resurrected from the dead and then went to heaven immediately, thus explaining why he isn't here in front of us. So you just inserted an event that could plausibly have happened without anybody actually seeing it take place. Like, the dude didn't have to be wandering around the city for your claim to be real. So anybody could have inserted this in anywhere along the way, and nobody could have contradicted them because it's an unfalsifiable claim.
And then you have 4 accounts, all of which basically agree with one another.
No, what? Are you kidding me right? You got to be joking. This isn't real, is it? One more time. I'm sorry.
And then you have 4 accounts, all of which basically agree with one another.
No. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. BibViz, Bible visualization. This is every Bible contradiction ever. Not everyone, of course, but many. I mean, look, it's just a bunch of lines. Let's just click any random one here. Is God holy? I'm sorry, is only God holy? Revelation 15:4, Exodus 22:31, Leviticus 11:44-45. They contradict each other. Here's another. Can God be found? Proverbs 2, Proverbs 8, Matthew 7, Luke 11 contradict each other. Is it okay to lie? Does God lie? What kind of animals may we eat? I mean, these are all contradictions. Who is the father of sin? Does God work on the Sabbath? Must everyone die? Where was Jacob buried? And these aren't even just gospel contradictions. These are just Bible-wide contradictions. Let me find some specific Bible contradictions if I can. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the 4 gospel accounts, and they were supposedly written by 4 different people, 4 different independent observers to Jesus' ministry and everything else. That's not actually the case. But they all contradict each other either way. Completely. All the way down. They were written decades after the fact. So they weren't even, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John weren't written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John either, for that matter. They were just named that, not named after the writers. Here, Contradictions in the Gospels. This is from Bart Ehrman's blog. This is the opening gambit in my debate with Reverend Matthew Firth on whether there are contradictions in the Gospels. I believe there are many. He believes there are none whatsoever. So who is right? I would strongly recommend that if you're really interested in the matter, you actually look up the passages in question and see for yourself. Start with one that may seem completely unimportant, but is to me a clear contradiction. In Mark 5:21-24, a man named Jairus approaches Jesus in distress. His daughter is very ill. He wants Jesus to come heal her so she doesn't die. Jesus agrees to go, but before he can get to Jairus' home, he's delayed by a woman who herself desperately needs to be healed. While Jesus is dealing with her, it takes a while. Someone comes from Jairus' house to tell him it's too late. The girl has now died. Jesus comforts Jairus, goes and raises her from the dead. Matthew also tells the story in Matthew 9, but in this case, Jairus comes to Jesus to tell him that my daughter has just now died. He wants him to raise her from the dead. Jesus goes and does so. So the contradiction. When Jairus comes to Jesus, does he want him to heal his sick daughter, who unfortunately dies before Jesus can get there? Or does Jairus come only after the girl is dead, wanting Jesus to raise her from the dead? That is one super basic example. One simple example of a contradiction. I happen to have like a subscription to Bart Ehrman's blog here, so I'm just going to refresh, just take a quick glance through. Matthew and Luke both give a genealogy of Jesus that's strictly patrilineal, father to son, going back for generations. Who was Joseph's father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, and so on, all the way back to King David? Was it Jacob, Mathan, and Eleazar, or was it Heli, Mathat, and Levi, according to Matthew or Luke? Those are very important points. That's a contradiction that cannot be sidestepped. It needs to be addressed. The Bibles have the Gospels have like 1 billion contradictions all through them. It's absurd to say such a thing.
And you have 4 accounts, all of which basically agree with one another. And where they would seem to disagree on certain details, they do so in the way that newspapers disagree about...
No, they don't. Not even close. Not even a little bit. This is that's like really groundbreaking. The reason Jesus' lineage was in the Bible in the first place is because if he isn't of Jewish descent, he cannot be the Messiah. He must be Jewish. And we have 2 gospel accounts giving us 2 different lineages that contradict each other. This is Christianity breaking information. You cannot have a contradiction here.
And where they would seem to disagree on certain details, they do so in the way that newspapers disagree about news events. In fact, the fact that they seem to disagree about certain details or seem to approach events from different vantage points actually would be a mark in their favor.
No. Large swaths, I know what he's about to say here. Large swaths of the Gospels were plagiarized. They were just copy and pasted. The things that were said by Jesus were likely said in Aramaic and then translated to Greek. But we have large sections of Gospel accounts that are copied word for word from Greek to Greek. No translator would translate it exactly the same that way because they're listening to it in the first place, not something that's written down. So we do have 1 billion examples of word-for-word copying between the gospel accounts. But aside from that, it doesn't lend any credibility or credence to it.
Because if they were all exactly, completely in lockstep on vantage point and every single line, you would say, oh, this was just contrived. The fact that this was all circulated, the fact that we see this in non-Christian sources. We
see what in non-Christian sources? We have a couple of examples of a historian that was around at the time named Josephus. I believe he was Roman. He was in the Roman military, I think. Let me just double check that. He joined the Roman forces under the command of Vespasian's son and later successor, Titus, at the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD. So yeah, anyway, Josephus was around, and he had some passages that he had written about Jesus, but as it happens, a bunch of passages supposedly written by Josephus were forgeries. It was fake. He never wrote that stuff. I think there were like 1 or 2 that he wrote, but there were a total of 5 that were attributed to him incorrectly.
The fact that this event changed the entire world. And
so did Muhammad's appearance and his whole conquest and all that. That changed the world too. Is that evidence of Islam? Are you kidding me right now?
The fact that this event changed the entire world and has withstood debunking for 2,000 years.
Bro, that's the problem. It hasn't.
And the best that Christopher Hitchens can offer is some stupid line from David Hume. Weak sauce. What's the next one?
Okay, that doesn't. You didn't debunk anything. Are you kidding me right now?
I never said that I attacked bad behavior that was undertaken or embarked upon in the name of, as you put it, religion. I do insist that this kind of bad behavior is innate in religion, is part of religion itself. It's not an abuse of it or something undertaken in the name of. It's a direct consequence of the willingness to believe in the supernatural and the willingness to believe in a supernatural dictatorship in particular. Is it not written that I come not to bring a peace but a sword? Surely it is.
So he's saying that religion is violent in its very nature, or Christianity, I guess, is violent by its nature.
Is it not written that those who won't follow me shall be must depart and be cast into everlasting fire? Not a very gentle or pacific remark. Is it not said?
That's not said, but okay.
That if you don't give up your family, if you don't give up thrift...
Well, I guess it says that you'll be thrown into a lake of fire, right? Or something to that effect in Revelation. But the concept of hell, our modern concept of hell, is not actually in the Bible.
That those who won't follow me shall be must depart and be cast into everlasting fire. Not a very gentle or pacific remark. Is it not said that if you don't give up your family, if you don't give up thrift, if you don't give up everyone who loves you and everything you love to sacrifice yourself for me, you're not worthy? These are strongly coercive and implicitly authoritarian or even totalitarian statements.
Oh my goodness gracious. It's funny going back to these now, because I still see how they appeal to a 13-year-old. Because Christopher Hitchens, for all of his British charm, he talks like an edgy 13-year-old online.
Wow, that's clever, yeah. He's so good at debunking people. All he's doing right now is insulting people. That's not like furthering the conversation in any way. Yeah, great method of debunking there, Michael. MK. Hold on, somebody said, Buddhism is not violent. Yeah, that's a good point. Not all religion is violent. Jains, the more extreme you get as a Jain, the less violent you become, because they're radical, non-violent people. But religion pushes people toward extreme mindsets. I probably should have said extreme rather than violent. It oftentimes brings out violence. I think the cases in which it brings out extreme non-violence are exceptions to the rule.
I mean, this is not sophisticated stuff at all. By the end, he's really misparaphrasing the gospel accounts.
He is? How?
Christ doesn't tell you that you have to abandon your family in order to follow him, though you should place him and God first.
Dude, I love how he's touching. He said, well, Jesus didn't say that. Well, he kind of said that. I love it, dude. Even when he's trying to debunk something and pretend it's not real, he has to admit that, yeah, okay, it's a little real.
Life, and then everything follows from that. And then he says, Christianity is not a pacifist religion. No, it's not a pacifist religion. That's true. But it's not a call to violence. And he said,
that wasn't the point, bro. Are you serious? The more extreme you get in most religions, the more extreme you get in Christianity, at the very least, the more violent you tend to get.
Says it's a supernatural dictatorship. And this gets back to something he said in the previous video too. He says, can you imagine how insane it would be that the laws of nature could be suspended in the course of miracles? You say, well, the natural has to be based on a foundation of the supernatural. This is necessary. The fact that we can speak, the fact that we're communicating ideas.
Bro, this means absolutely nothing. What you are saying right now is nonsense. It has no bearing on absolutely anything at all. It means nothing. The fact that I can speak is evidence that God is real. Well, I simply disagree. I think you're wrong. I think the fact that you can speak is evidence that God is not real. Now, disprove that. Checkmate, Christian. That's what he's doing.
At all, which I can't touch, I can't smell them, I can't see them, but nevertheless they exist. The fact that mathematics exists, the fact that loves and dreams and hopes and desires and any intelligible thing at all exists.
I don't understand what this has to do with anything.
Shows you that there is a metaphysical layer to reality.
It does?
and it's more fundamental than the physical layer. Really shallow stuff. Fit for a 13-year-old. Next one.
Some of your most strongly stated arguments are that violence, death, destruction, the motivation being religion, discredit those who would promote a belief in God. However, I think there's an imbalance there in that the nuclear bomb was created by physicists and is the most demonstrable violence perpetrated on mankind. So I wonder how you respond to that.
Again, like, this has no basis in logic or anything. Like, what are you talking about? You're saying Christopher Hitchens says that the more Christian somebody gets, the more like deep and extreme they get, the more violent they become. But the atomic bomb is the strongest or the best example of like violence in the world. I'm trying to like connect the dots here. Like, what the hell are you talking about? What does this have to do with anything at all? Am I the idiot here?
Well, physics isn't an ideology. Physics isn't a belief system.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, what are you talking about?
It's a science.
Well, I think that would be subjective.
I mean, you could. I mean,
It would be subjective? No, it's not. Physics is not an ideology.
any more than the Marie Curie discovering radium makes her practice morally different.
Dude, it feels like Christopher Hitchens just heard that last thing that the guy said, and he's just tripping over his words, trying to like make sense of what the hell he said.
Radium makes her practice morally different. I mean, it's not comparing like with like. What I'm talking about are specific religious injunctions to do evil.
Look at the shit-eating grin on this guy's face right now.
To mutilate the genitalia of children, for example. To take the pastor, Douglas Wilson, who Dr. Craig was just mentioning, with whom I crossed swords several times this year, recently in Dallas. I happened to be mentioning to him about the commandment to exterminate the Amalekites in one of our debates, and he said that commandment is still valid. If there were any Amalekites, it would be his job to make sure that they were all put to the sword. And some of the virgins left over for slavery, purposes better imagined perhaps than described. I think this is a very serious problem. I'm not taking refuge in the commonplace that sometimes religious people behave badly, that would discredit religion. That would be a very soft option. I'm saying there are specific biblical scriptural injunctions to do evil.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. My God, that guy was a really good speaker, right? I should watch some of his debates. That would be really interesting. You know what? I'm going to pull some of that up so that I can watch that. Owen Morgan Unfiltered. If you want to watch some of these, I watch this stuff live with people. Let me pull one up. Christopher Hitchens debate. There's one specific debate I'm thinking of. It's near the end. This one. Yeah, here we are. 92Y. I've been past 92Y. It's in New York City, Manhattan. 92nd Street East.
God is not great.
Yeah, I want to watch this later. We're going to watch this on my Unfiltered YouTube channel, so stick around if you want to see it. This guy is just really interesting.
We talk about human action. We're talking about political action, the decision to create a bomb, the decision to drop that bomb, the decision to talk to somebody about dropping the bomb.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that. We were talking about physics, like the physics of an atom being split to produce a lot of energy. This isn't about the morality of a bomb. That is an ideology that can like be produced or can guide decisions on or whatever. That's not what this was about.
That would be a political action that involves society. But at a higher level, what that involves is applied morality. So before you make that decision, you have to know something about applied morality. How do we come to those decisions and
No, you don't have to know something about applied morality to make that decision. You can just make the decision.
You have to know something about applied morality. How do we come to those decisions and what does our morality say about those decisions? Above applied morality, you have morality broadly, more abstract morality. Above that, you have anthropology.
Anthropology is above morality? What does that mean? Hang on, I'm sorry. Ology is the study of something. That's what that suffix means. The study of human societies and cultures and their development. Why does he say anthropology is above morality? What does he mean by this?
And what does our morality say about those decisions? Above applied morality, you have morality broadly, more abstract morality. Above that, you have anthropology. What is man? What is the nature of man such that we can even make these kinds of moral decisions and come to these moral conclusions and
I'm so fucking lost.
engage in these political actions? Above anthropology, you have epistemology. How can we know anything at all? Know anything about human beings, but know anything about anything? How do we know? And then beyond epistemology, you have the question of theology. What?
No, you don't. Epistemology and theology are at best next to each other in this weird cobbled together hierarchy that he has created. As they say, science tells you what is and religion tells you what ought to be. I mean, that's not correct, obviously. There's so much nuance to this conversation that I'm not addressing here, but that says nothing about theology being above epistemology. What?
Is there to know? What is reality? What is? Christopher Hitchens stops at like the first circle, as do all of these people. Well, that's just science. Okay, well, what's behind the science? What are the...
Well, that's the thing. I don't know. That's why I'm using science to figure it out.
Well, that's just science. Okay, well, what's behind the science? What are the premises that go into that? They don't want to acknowledge that. So they say, no, religion is all bad. Religion is a habit of virtue that renders to God what he deserves. That.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. 1 second here. A habit of virtue that renders to God what is his. Is that what he just said?
So they say, no, religion is all bad. Religion is a habit of virtue that renders
A habit of virtue
to God what he deserves.
that renders to God what he deserves. I don't feel like that sentence made any sense. Is it just me, or was that just complete nonsense all the way down?
That's it. People have different views on religion, some more correct, some less correct. But to have this childish atheism coming from Christopher Hitchens, who throws his hands up and says, la, 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 religion bad, religion...
Well, that's literally not what he's doing. Okay, he is giving you logical reasons for questioning your worldview. He is not saying, la, 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 religion bad. And you're literally like, it seems like the only response that Mike here has for any of this is, we wouldn't be able to talk if God didn't exist. That's pretty much all he's got to offer us.
Atheism coming from Christopher Hitchens, who throws his hands up and says, la, 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 religion bad, religion... Well, everybody engages in some kind of religion, right?
No, not right.
Some people just are not conscious of what they're doing, unfortunately, like Hitchens, who speaks very well, but who doesn't have very deep things to say.
Look, you hearing this right now? The irony of this guy saying such a thing. One more time.
Hitchens, who speaks very well, but who doesn't have very deep things to say. People are raving about Genucell skincare.
Oh my God, we've got a sponsorship. Okay, you know what? Let's listen to his sponsorship. Let's figure out who we shouldn't be supporting. Genucell.
From Huntsville, Alabama says, my skin looks so soft and clear. I've seen a reduced number of fine lines and dark spots. I found a new lifetime product. Absolutely love it. Genucell skincare uses a one-of-a-kind proprietary...
Love the music in the background, by the way. Fantastic. Top tier. Who the hell is Jessica?
Flower base developed by the founder and pharmacist, who is a great guy, by the way. It also comes along with rare botanical extracts and powerful antioxidants for skincare results that work.
Antioxidants? How do antioxidants help your skin? Is this a real thing? Or I thought antioxidants were substances that absorb oxygen molecules from different bacteria and stuff in your gut. Is that not right? Am I wrong about this? Do antioxidants help skin? Yes, okay, my mistake. Apparently they do help skin. All right. Turns out I was the idiot this time.
Guaranteed. I said I would not endorse the product if I could not try it, if I were not impressed by the product. And also, fellas, I know sometimes men are a little skeptical of getting into cosmetics too much, even slightly more.
Yeah, what are you, gay?
Men than women use Genucell, and for good reason. Genucell's most...
Okay, I'm done with your stupid sponsorship. Sorry, I can't do it. All right, let's continue.
Knowles YT.
Some people I know who are atheists will say they wish they could believe it. Some people I know who are former believers say they wish they could have their old faith back. They miss it. I don't understand this at all.
Dude, this is Peter Hitchens. This is Christopher Hitchens' brother, and he's like a right-wing Christian nutcase, sadly. I'm really, really sorry to say.
Believers say they wish they could have their old faith back. They miss it. I don't understand this at all. I think it's an excellent thing that there's no reason to believe in the absurd propositions I just, admittedly rather briefly, rehearsed to you. The main reason for this, I think, is that it is a totalitarian belief. It is the wish to be a slave.
It absolutely is. Why is he not or shaking his head? No, it is absolutely a totalitarian belief. You want God to control every aspect of your life down to your thoughts. Everything. How can you deny this? Is he not a Christian?
It is the desire that there be an unalterable, unchallengeable, tyrannical authority who can convict you of thought crime while you are asleep, who can subject you, who must indeed subject you, to a total surveillance around the clock, every waking and sleeping minute of your life, I say of your life, before you're born, and, even worse, and where the real fun begins, after you're dead. A celestial North Korea.
I mean, they're laughing. That's real. That's 100% real. That's what is described in Christianity.
Who wants this to be true? Who but a slave desires such a ghastly fate?
So Hitchens says it's slavery to serve God. Is it?
Yeah. Yeah. It controls your mind and your everything all the way down. Now, if you want that, okay. But that's what it is. That's what's happening. Yes. Of course. Definitionally.
It now. Because I'm more persuaded by what Christ says in the Gospels, which is the man who sins is a slave to sin. And anyone who's ever suffered from an addiction knows this.
Okay. God, you hear the sad, quiet music in the background start just now? We'll step back and listen again. Okay. Slave to sin. Fine. That doesn't say anything about being a slave to God, though. You're very clearly a slave to God in this framework.
Is a slave to sin. And anyone who's ever suffered from an addiction knows this.
You hear it? You hear the music?
You begin using drugs, let's say, or booze or something.
Okay.
You begin indulging in this vice because you think it's an expression of your freedom.
No, I don't think that's why people do it. I don't think they're just doing it to express their freedom. But whatever. All right, let's follow them along.
Free. No one can tell me what to do, man. I'm just going to do what I want to do. But then the more you do it, the more you feel impelled to do it, the harder it is to stop doing it.
Okay. But let me think of a good example. Having a girlfriend out of wedlock, having a baby out of wedlock isn't like doing a drug, but it's still sinful or whatever. I'm not a slave to my sins. I revel in them. Actually, I don't think I sin at all, quote unquote. According to Christianity, I don't think I sin. I certainly used to, but I'm so like chill and tame now, just doing my thing and living my life that I don't, yeah. I use a vape to try to get off of cigarettes completely. That's about it. I don't think I do any other sinning.
And then you become a slave. This is why Lord Acton points out that freedom is not the ability to do whatever we want whenever we want to do it, but freedom is the right to do what we ought to do. It's
okay, that doesn't make any sense. Freedom is the right to do what we ought to do? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to like process this. Freedom is the right to do what we should do. So in Michael Knowles' kind of framework here, I should be married to a wife instead of dating somebody out of wedlock, right? Freedom isn't the ability to date somebody out of wedlock. Freedom is the right to get married, which is the thing I'm supposed to do. What?
It's true. God asks you to submit yourself to
It is not true.
Him, to conform your will to His will. But that isn't slavery. That's freedom. As Christ says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
Oh my God, dude. This is, what's that quote from 1984? Freedom is slavery lies or truth or lies, whatever the hell. What's that quote from that book?
And what's the alternative? The alternative is a perverted, false form of freedom, a false form of liberty, which is really license, that makes you a slave.
Okay, that's fine. I'll take it. I'm good with that. You be over there in your corner feeling terrible and eating yourself up for having a dream that you shouldn't have had, and I'll be over here having a good time. How about that? Does that sound okay to you?
And a slave to a much harsher master than God, who loves you. It makes you a slave to the devil, who wants to consume you, and who
God, so full of
often does when we refuse God's grace. Okay.
Yeah, so I noticed that he picked drugs for that kind of analogy or whatever. Drugs are like the one thing that he could have used as an example that would arguably fit. Like, you are submitting yourself into a slave relationship when you get into drug addiction in many ways. But average, regular, run-of-the-mill sins like dating somebody and having a kid out of wedlock, or swearing. Swearing is another good one. Or swearing. Those things are not slavery.
Next one.
It was the fate of many Jewish people in Europe to have to wonder to whom they could turn in their time of extremity. And I'll tell you the place they didn't turn, which was to the churches that had made the official concordat with Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini.
Oh boy, I know a lot about this subject because I wrote about it. OwenMorgan.com. It's on Amazon Audible. Was Hitler an atheist? Give it a look. Let me just step back, listen one more time here so I can think about this. By the way, walking into this, the Catholic Church signed a concordat with Hitler, July 20th, 1933. I know that because it's my birthday. Anyway, they signed a concordat, and concordats are treaties between the Vatican, basically, and foreign governments. And concordats are bad. They are always bad because the Catholic Church uses political instability or political or tangible need in that moment. Like, we need food to feed our people. They use somebody's need in that moment to sign an agreement with a country that lasts forever. For example, the Catholic Church has signed treaties with governments that are from like smaller countries that aren't well established, whose government is in question. Like, did this leader actually win this election, for example? And the Catholic Church says, if you agree to give us control of the educational system so that all teachers in the country are Catholic priests, and we baptize and confirm the children the moment that they enter school. If you do that, we will back you. We will say you are the correct leader of this country. And they do that stuff, these crooked leaders of smaller countries, and they're stuck with it forever. There's no time limit on a concordat. The Catholic Church will now forever have access to this country's educational system. That's the type of that the Catholic Church does. And they signed a concordat with Hitler on July 20th, 1933, basically agreeing to support Hitler completely, acknowledging him as the leader, lending him credibility on an international stage that he did not have yet. They agreed to do that for him if he allowed them to run the schools, basically. It didn't end well because, as the Catholic Church found out later, authoritarian governments can't be trusted to hold up their end of a bargain. And since then, the Catholic Church as an institution has, for the most part, supported democracy because they can trust that they'll have their end of the bargain held up the most from democracy. But in the end, they will manipulate systems, back dissidents, and whatever it takes to take control of a country. Hitler feared the Catholic Church and the Pope so much that he was even willing to draw up a plan to kidnap the Pope. Seriously. Again, I write about this in my book, Chapter on Catholicism, I think chapter 7. Was Hitler an atheist? He didn't end up kidnapping him, of course, but he did write up he planned to, anyway. Anyway, let's listen to what Christopher Hitchens has to say here.
When we refuse God's grace. Okay, next one.
It was the fate of many Jewish people in Europe to have to wonder to whom they could turn in their time of extremity. And I'll tell you the place they didn't turn, which was to the churches that had made the official concordat with Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini.
Absolutely correct. Individual parishes, monasteries, and convents, like monks and nuns and things, individual churches brought in some Jewish refugees. They opened their catacombs to hide Jews and things, some of them. And there's been some speculation that the Pope himself, later on in the war, opened his summer home. I believe it was called Castel Gandolfo. Opened that to a family of Jews. I think maybe 4 of them or something to live there to hide, basically. But the Pope had power, and he did not use it. He chose not to use it. Hitler feared him, and he intentionally and specifically chose not to use his power. If he had turned against Hitler, it would have been a war from within. Hitler wouldn't have been able to trust his armies to fight for him anymore. Germany was a world power, very powerful. He could size up armies and determine if he could take them or not. He could plan around, draw up these sabotage and things like that. But he couldn't do that with the Catholic Church because half of his army would be gone overnight if the Catholic Church turned against him. It was a battle from within, and no country wants a battle from within when Catholics turn on them. That's the power of the Pope. And he chose not to use it. And as a result, there's an acts of evil and an acts of virtue section in my book because he chose not to use it. In Budapest, there was a priest named Father Kuhn who went around with a group of Nazis who, when leveling their guns at Jewish victims, yelled, "In the name of Christ, fire." That shit wouldn't have happened if the Pope had taken a hard stance against this type of thing. In all fairness, the Pope did take kind of a half-hearted stance in 1937. I think it was in 1937, yes. And then again in 1939. He was about to in 1939. February 10th, he was planning on it before the war actually started. He wrote up this, it's called the Lost Encyclical, the Hidden Encyclical. He wrote this whole speech, the Pope did, that he's going to deliver, denouncing Nazism and hate and racism and everything else. And the day before he delivered it, February 9th, he died. There are conspiracy theories all over this moment in history, but there was no conspiracy. He was old. He knew he was, he knew he had one foot in the grave, one on a banana peel, and he just didn't make it. But Mussolini contacted the Secretary of State for the Vatican, dude's name was Pacelli, and told him to get rid of the speech completely before it was seen. And Pacelli did. He got rid of it. He erased it completely. The Vatican printing office said not one comma will remain. However, we got a copy of it. It just released in 2008, I think, from Vatican Archives. It was weak. And again, if you want to read through it, I quote it in my book. So give that a look if you're interested. But yeah, little history lesson there.
Jewish people in Europe to have to wonder to whom they could turn in their time of extremity. And I'll tell you the place they didn't turn, which was to the churches that had made the official concordat with Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini.
Correct.
The churches that had told their parties to vote for him in the Reichstag, the church that had told, especially the Catholic Church, that had told its bishops to celebrate Adolf Hitler's birthday every year from...
Yep, and part of the Concordat was swearing an oath of loyalty to Hitler. Again, it gave Hitler credibility on a world stage that he did not have yet, that he didn't have to have, that nobody had to have given him. And the Catholic Church was the first. They gave it to him. The Catholic Church gave him concessions that they didn't have to give him so that they would get things in return. They were buying the right to control the school systems in Germany with Jewish blood. Not just Jewish blood, with the blood of innocents, with the blood of, other Catholics, of communists and socialists and disabled people and Jews and Jehovah's Witnesses, all of them. They purchased that right with their blood.
the pulpit, which they did till April 1945.
This is so profoundly dishonest.
No, it's correct. It's absolutely 100% completely and totally correct, actually.
On which the Nazi Party based itself, which in many cases violated the seal of the confessional to turn over resistors, and in all cases turned over the birth records of the parishes of Bavaria and the rest of Germany, so that the Nuremberg laws could be enforced and everyone with even a particle of Jewish blood could be identified, set aside for deportation and persecution. Anyone who doesn't know this doesn't know anything about it.
Oh my goodness, so profoundly dishonest.
No, it's correct. You can say it's dishonest all you want, but you're just wrong.
Was excommunicated or threatened with excommunication by the church for taking part in the final solution. Paul Johnson, a Roman Catholic historian, estimates that 40 to 50% of the Waffen-SS were communicating Roman Catholics, not...
Interesting. I'm not sure if that's... I don't... That very well could be accurate. I haven't heard the statistic, but I do have other statistics here that I wrote about in my book. Actually, let me just pull it up since he's talking about it. I know exactly where to find it. Again, Amazon and Audible, owenmorgan.com if you want a signed copy. Was Hitler an atheist? Here. I'm just going to quote from my book, Nazi Religious Perspectives, Chapter 1. 57% of military officers identified as Protestant, compared to 54% of the general population. Only 26% of officers identified as Catholic, compared to the general population's 41%. Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, was not a Christian. He was what one might call a pagan. The highest percentage of people leaving the church came from the SS. A secret report from 1939 showed that Protestants made up 60%, Catholics made up 21.1%, and Gottgläubig, meaning believing in God, made up 18.7% of the SS. The number of deists, or those simply believing in God, eventually rose to 25%. So anyway, there's a little, there are some statistics for you. Here's a little bit more. In 1948, the U.S. comprised 69% Protestant, 22% Catholics. And Germany was 54% Protestant, 41% Catholic. Anyway, yeah, little historical information for you there.
One of them was ever threatened with the smallest punishment for what they did, or were doing.
Nope.
Wow, just amazingly dishonest on the history of
No, it's just literally true.
The church and in the Second World War, amazingly dishonest. It's true, Pope Pius XII, to my knowledge, never excommunicated Hitler. Hitler was not a practicing Catholic.
Pope Pius XI was the pope from Hitler's rise clear through to 1939. Like I said, he died February 10th. Then Pope Pius XII, Pacelli, was the Secretary of State previously. He took the popehood, or whatever the hell you call it, from 39 clear through to the end of the war. So Pacelli worked closely with Hitler, made deals with him, communicated with him, even did it secretly, like went to an apartment building in secret and negotiated with the Nazi government through Philip von Hessen, a prince.
He did, however, try to kill Hitler.
Pacelli tried to kill Hitler? No.
Pius XII worked quite closely, actually, with the German resistance against Hitler. He would give the Brits tips. He was...
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true, I suppose. But he definitely tried to maintain neutrality for a long time. He worked with the Americans when they were retaking Italy in 1943, I think. Hitler took Italy after Mussolini was deposed. And then Pacelli worked with the Americans when they were coming in to take Italy back. So he worked with them then, but he tried to maintain neutrality for the most part, and he did deal with Hitler privately. I didn't hear anything about him trying to assassinate Hitler. Is this a gap in my knowledge? I'm gonna have to look into this more. I don't think this is true. I think this is just made up. I mean, the biggest assassination attempt on Hitler's life was the July 20th plot, 1944. I don't believe Pacelli was involved in that at all, first of all. Second, there were about 40 attempts on Hitler's life total, only 20 of which are even worth mentioning. So maybe he was involved in one of those, but I don't remember hearing about this. I'm looking through the chat here. Is it me? Am I wrong on this? Yeah, I don't think this is right. I've never heard this before. I think he's just like making this up.
A go-between between the German resistance and the Allies. He had a spy trying to kill Hitler, Joseph Mueller, a Catholic priest.
Okay, hold on. Joseph Mueller, spy, assassinate Hitler. I don't know anything about this. I'm gonna have to look into it more. But I will say this: the Vatican also had people assisting in creating rat lines. The Vatican was a rat line to get Nazis out of Germany and into South America or Spain or other areas. So yeah, there's that. I'm gonna have to look into this. I did not hear about this at all. I don't think this is true. I think he's just making this shit up. The Vatican spies plot to kill Hitler. Okay, this is all from like right-wing nutcase websites like the Daily Mail. And the Catholic Philly, whatever the hell that is. I am super suspect. I'm sorry. I'm not buying it. People saying he's just making this up. I'm gonna look this up and I'm gonna put it in the final product. Did he make this up? The answer is yes. I looked it up. I took a longer look at the claim made by Michael Knowles here, and the answer is it's not true. The Pope did not hire or like recruit or something a priest to attempt an assassination on Hitler's life. There was a priest involved in the resistance, and he sometimes communicated with the Vatican back and forth, but he was not like recruited by the Pope, nor was he recruited to kill Hitler specifically. Joseph Mueller was his name. So it's flat out fictitious like the rest.
And the Allies, he had a spy trying to kill Hitler, Joseph Mueller, a Catholic priest.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just not buying that.
Pope Pius XII personally saved at least 15,000 Jews.
Where did you get that? What are you talking about? He saved some, personally, that could stay in Castel Gandolfo. Is he just making shit up right now? Like, where did he get that number?
Worked around Rome, but elsewhere as well. Castel Gandolfo, which is the papal retreat, housed thousands of Jews.
No.
During World War II to protect them from the Nazis. The church
This is just like made up, completely made up.
used.
You know where I bet he got that 15,000 number? There was something called the gold ransom. The gold ransom, again, I write about this in my book. Check it out. But the gold ransom was where Mussolini was deposed as the as the dictator in Italy, and Hitler invaded. I think early September 1943, he invaded and took control again. There was basically a Nazi in charge of this district in Italy that had like 40,000 Jews or something. And Mussolini hadn't bothered trying to, quote unquote, solve the Jewish question there because he didn't believe the question needed to be solved. Like the Jewish problem, if you will. He said he just didn't think it was a problem. So when the Nazis came in, the guy that was in charge of the region said, I don't think it really needs to be solved here either. They're just living their lives. But I do want their gold. So he created what he called the gold ransom, where he said he wanted basically what is equivalent to $4.2 million worth of gold. I think 50 kilograms of gold. He wanted it there within like 36 hours or something. And they showed up with some, the Jewish community, but not anywhere near enough. So the Jewish community in the area asked the Vatican for help, and it took the Vatican a while, but they finally came back and said, we will loan you the gold. It's obvious we will want this back, quote unquote, but there won't be any interest on it, and there's no repayment schedule or whatever. We're just going to give it to you, and you pay us when you get it. But it didn't matter. Because the local Christian communities in the area, non-Catholic, just normal Christian communities, came together and donated their rings and their medals and everything that they had that was made of gold, and brought it all to the place. And they had enough when the time came. They had to weigh the gold twice because the Nazis claimed the Jews were cheating. But they got it. They put it in boxes, put it on a train, sent it to Berlin, where it sat until the end of the war. Wasn't even used. And the Jews were deported a month later. Anyway, the Vatican used that as a propaganda feather in their cap, if you will, to claim that they melted down precious artifacts to save Jews. That didn't happen. They weren't going to melt down precious artifacts in the first place. They could have just gotten the gold, could have purchased it if nothing else, first of all. And second, they didn't need to donate anything at all. They didn't need to loan anything to anybody because it was already donated by local Christian communities. So, and maybe that's what he's talking about. Either way, just a complete flat out lie.
Of Jews during World War II to protect them from the Nazis. The church used so many means at her disposal to keep Jews away.
The church is a chick? I didn't know that. I thought the church was a dude.
The church used so many means at her disposal to keep Jews away from the Nazi persecution. Jewish historians estimate some 860,000 Jews were saved by the actions of the Catholic Church.
I have no idea where he's getting that. I've never heard that number before. I would estimate, though, that they got millions killed by not fighting against Hitler when they had the opportunity, by agreeing to swear an oath of loyalty to Hitler when the time came. 1933, it was pretty early on, right at the start of everything, and they swore an oath of loyalty. That's pretty unforgivable in my book. So, no, the Catholic Church is to blame here, completely and totally.
During World War II, the Catholic Church, which was a victim of Hitler and saw
That's true.
herself as a victim of Hitler. The chief rabbi of Jerusalem thanked Pius XII for his efforts. So this is just a complete fable.
No, it's not a fable. And again, like individual convents, monasteries, parishes, and even Castel Gandolfo were used to save individuals in some cases. In one case, a man walked up to a convent in Italy when Hitler took it, and he had a baby, and he knocked on the convent door, and he put the baby in the arms of a nun and said, "If you don't take this baby, I'm going to shoot it and then myself." So, things were ugly, real ugly, and individuals did a lot to help. But as an institution, the Catholic Church didn't do that. It actively helped Hitler as an institution.
Coming from Hitchens, or what he does, I guess this would be the way that he tries to be not a total liar about this, is he'll say, well, there was some priest who was really bad, or, oh, there was some bishop who was really, really...
No, they were all pretty bad. There were a few that were okay.
But look at the actions of the church, all the way up to the head of the church and the vicar of Christ. 860,000 Jews saved. Goodness gracious.
That's just a lie.
I mean, at least in the other arguments that Christopher Hitchens makes, they're extremely shallow, but they're trying in some way to grapple with some question of morality. But there, Hitchens just has to totally ignore history, whether it's through ignorance or whether it's just through his deep hatred of God, his apparent hatred of God.
He's just lying. Knowles is just lying here. I will give him this, though. I feel like Hitchens' depiction of the church is not the depiction that I would have laid down exactly, but close enough, I suppose.
I'm not sure exactly what it is. So revisiting these things, it makes me ashamed of myself that I fell for these arguments. The proof of the pudding is in the tasting on a lot of...
The proof of the pudding? I thought it was the proof in the pudding. Am I wrong? What's the saying?
These questions as well. And so you can see that the arguments aren't very good, and you can go back and read theological sources or philosophical sources or texts on ethics and history, I guess, in the case of his last video. But ultimately, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. Does Chris Hitchens look like a guy who was flourishing? Look like a guy who...
Yeah, you take a picture of him when he's dying from cancer. Yeah, that's honest.
Was happy, who was at peace, who was comfortable in virtue? Is that...
I don't know what this has to do with the fact that you have no evidence for your claim that God is like... that the Christian God that you believe in, specifically like the evangelical nutcase hate gay people God, what does that have to do with the claim that that one is real? I don't understand.
That the sort of behavior you would want to model your life after? Is that the kind of guy where you say, this guy has figured it out?
No, he knows how to live.
I don't think so.
Lives fast, I'll give him that one.
Caused 10 years of confusion for me, but glad I got out. Not everybody's quite so lucky to escape from the misery-inducing delusions of...
I'm not miserable.
Atheism. Okay, I'm Michael Knowles. We'll see you next time.
Anyway, yeah, love the propagandistic music in the background too, right?
Delusions of atheism. Okay, I'm Michael Knowles. We'll see you next time.
Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments. This is just insane. It drives me nuts how these people can just so brazenly lie. They could just say whatever they want and people believe it. Absolutely nuts. You know why I wrote the book in the first place? Because I heard like this from people like him. And then I see tweets from like Seth Andrews specifically. I saw a tweet from Seth Andrews that basically said Hitler was a Christian, and it had some quotes from Hitler about his Christian belief. And I was like, who is right? What is real? Which one is true? I feel like I'm being tugged left and right and like around instead of people just telling me the facts of the matter. So hopefully I kind of outlined the facts, the information, like the real information on the subject for you. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments.